Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for All Things DSO. We are joined by Brian Colao, the director of Dykema DSO Industry Group. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Beth. It seems like the time just goes so fast. We're back here again doing this, but as always, so happy to be here with you.
It has been crazy. I mean, first of all, there's been a lot of events picking up again. And one of the things that seems to really be gathering steam is this idea of like smaller meetings with like role specific. I know that the CCOs just got together for the first ever meeting of chief clinical officers, and they were really talking about how many of them had never met each other before and how it was really fantastic to have a vendor-free environment where they could hang out and talk about what was, really impacting all of their groups that they were with.
Well, I've been doing that for a while. I'm on my fourth, a couple things. I'm on my fourth leadership event. We just had it. Planet DDS was a big part of it. And, it's terrific. And yes, I did see the CCO event. I think that was a great idea to get all the clinical directors together. I thought of maybe doing something like that over the years. There's only so many hours in the day to do everything. And I've got my leadership events, but I commend you guys for really putting that on. It looked like a great get together. And I think that at least the feedback I got from some of the clinical directors was it was a great value add to come and network with each other. And I think the smaller events are important. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for, say like our giant event. I don't want to just go on, but there's a time and a place for that. And I think everybody likes that. And that time is once a year to kind of do that. But I think the industry gets a lot of value from 3 or 4 other times a year, depending on what your individual role is. It could be an RCM boot camp, it could be my leadership event, it could be the CCO event. Depending on what your role is, I think there's a lot of value to 3 or 4 other times a year sitting down in a smaller setting and getting some really meaningful conversations that you can have in much smaller groups or one-on-one that you can't do at the giant events.
You and I haven't even talked about the agenda for Dykema. So tell us what's on the agenda for this year.
Well, I mean, it's going to be really, it's hard to keep coming up with like, say, this is the best one ever. And, I don't know if it's the best one ever, but it's going to be great. Okay. It's going to be comparable to anything anybody's ever seen. I can announce it now. Nick Saban is going to be there. The winningest coach in NCAA football history is going to close the event for us on that Friday. We've got Rick Pitino, the NCAA championship basketball coach. You must be a St. John's or a Kentucky fan or something, Beth, but he's going to be there on Thursday. He was with the Celtics for a while, or Providence, one of those teams, but he's going to be there on Thursday. So we've got 2 really, really big celebrity speakers, and, we're going to learn lessons from the challenging conditions. My presentation, and there's sort of a documentary that I've put together called Journey Through DSO History that I'm going to show on the 110-foot screen. And it's sort of a big budget documentary of from the beginning of time to where we are today with the DSO industry. Steve Bilt and Rick Workman are going to do, I think one of them is lessons through DSO history and the other one is turning points through DSO history. Steve Bilt's got a keynote, and then he's going to get on with Rick Workman and I think some economists, and they're going to talk about really important lessons to be learned, from the beginning of the industry through the present. As usual, we've got M&A, buy side and sell side things. We've got some really good 15-minute segments lined up on the psychology of getting maximum performance out of your, clinical and non-clinical staff. We've got integration of specialty on the big stage. We've got an international panel on the big stage. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff. I wasn't planning on going through the whole thing, but it's going to be great.
Tell me everything, Brian. Tell me everything.
Well, look, maybe we'll probably do one of these right before where we go through everything. But, right now I'm really excited about the agenda. Put a lot of time and effort. We've got, just a lot of big time, speakers, both, in our industry and then celebrity type people coming. Going to be more drone shows. Our club, that club we did from 11 to 2 a.m. What do they call it? Club Fuego or something. We're doing that again. So I think it's going to be really, really exciting.
Well, people tune into this because they always want to know what is the latest that's happening with the mergers and acquisitions. What can you tell us? Because, we've kind of gone 18 months since the new administration, won the election. How are people feeling about what's going on?
Yeah, it's kind of slowly, like the tortoise and the hare, where the tortoise kind of wins the race going real slow or something.
Oh, is that what it is?
It's recovering, but it's recovering slowly. Everybody wants it, and they've said it.
Yeah.
We just want this big. Hey, everybody jumped in the pool. We're back. It's just not that way. It's sort of like a few people got in, and then the next one, a couple more got in. And if you're here a year from now, the pool's going to be starting to fill up, but it's not going to be this noticeable moment where all of a sudden everybody just jumped in. Now I'm on the 5-yard line on a couple pretty big transactions. I can't talk like about them now other than to say, I hope, maybe even the next time we're together, there'll be an announcement about some of these things, but it's everything's moving just more slower, more deliberate. And I think if anybody thought there was just going to be this one moment in time when it was all going to explode, I don't think you're going to see that. You're just going to see, some people get in the pool, some people get in the pool, and then you're going to look up and say, gosh, it's pretty crowded here. I didn't realize, how crowded this was. I think that's going to be the way this recovery is going to work, as opposed to just an avalanche, like all at once, everybody just jumps in.
So Brian, pretend that it's just you and me talking, that no one's listening in. Who's in the pool? I mean, is it DSOs acquiring other DSOs? Is it private equity coming in? Like, what are the models that you're seeing right now that are on that 5-yard, yard line?
Well, a lot of what you're seeing, and you're going to continue to see this because of some of the, how should I say it? Some of the challenges that, with some of the platforms, is you're going to see strategics, DSOs, just acquire other DSOs. The benefit of this is, let's say you were a DSO and you have 25, 30 offices right now, but you wanted to have 100. Like your plan was to have a couple hundred, and you built up all this infrastructure and overhead because you said, it's okay for me to have all this infrastructure here with 10, 15 practices because I'm going to have 100 here in the next 2 years. And then the market collapsed. The interest rates went up, the whole M&A market collapsed. And what you maybe found is, oh my God, the interest rates tripled. I've got all this overhead and only like 25 offices, and I needed to have 100. And, you tried to lay some people off. You tried to do some things, but it's still, unfortunately, bloated. It's not feasible for this organization that I'm describing, this hypothetical one today, to get to 100 right now. I mean, if they had enough time, maybe, but it's not going to happen right now. And their overhead's too large, and no private equity group wants to buy all that overhead. But what we're seeing a lot is a strategic, a DSO that already has infrastructure in place for hundreds of offices, to just say, you know what, we're going to buy these 25. We're going to reduce all the overhead. We're going to cut all their infrastructure, except maybe a skeleton crew of folks that have institutional knowledge that we'll keep, but most of it will go away, and we can absorb this and instantly make, it'll be profitable because we're dropping all the overhead. So you're seeing a lot of that. And that's just a product of, the market getting caught with the rapidly changing conditions in 2022. If none of that ever happened with the interest rates and the inflation, those organizations might have had, a couple hundred, practices today, and might have been, great on their own. But because the timing, just, with investments, sometimes you get caught in the timing and it didn't work out. Now they're candidates to be acquired by DSOs. And you're hearing two terms, Beth. Yeah. You're hearing clinical level EBITDA and corporate EBITDA. And sometimes they're dramatically different. Like an organization, say, that has 25 or 30 offices, they might have clinical EBITDA of like $5 million. You're like, this thing's rocking and rolling, except you have $4.5 million of corporate overhead. So when you're done, you might say, well, actually, when we account for corporate overhead, our EBITDA is only $500,000 or less, or break even. And it's not very attractive at all. But if there was some way to eliminate the corporate EBITDA, or not corporate overhead, I'm sorry, by getting a big organization that already had overhead to just absorb it, you could say on day one, it's $5 million of EBITDA on day one, because we've eliminated the corporate overhead. And that's a very appealing transaction to the right buyers. So you're seeing a lot of that. the traditional private equity buying the larger platforms, everything's for sale. And I think private equity continues to kick the tires, evaluate, take a look at things. But the conditions still, even with the interest rates going down a little bit, I think when the new Fed person takes over, and I'm a little discouraged, I don't know if you're following this whole thing that they're investigating the existing Fed chairman as a result of, they said he spent too much on some buildings or something. And what everybody's saying in Congress, even some Republicans, was we won't appoint the new person until you end this investigation of the old person. And that may tie over the term. And that's a little problematic because the new person that they wanted to confirm was going to be very pro lowering interest rates. So now, instead of what I had counted on in around May, the new person taking over, we may have this protracted situation where the other person hangs around for several more months. And then, I don't know what that's going to do. So the interest rates need to go down, and they're not low enough right now is the bottom line of what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, I mean, the reason why Republicans and Democrats in Congress are calling for the end of the investigation is because they don't feel like it's a valid investigation to be going on. So that's
this is not being a political show. We're not getting into that. But what we are just saying, what we got to get into, though, is it might delay everything, right? I don't know about right or wrong, but we thought the one person was stepping down and the other person was going to get in there. And now the other person may not get in there for several months, and that may affect the rate at which the interest rates go down. I mean, that's why I feel like we got to talk about that part of it.
Well, we have 3 questions that come in from people that registered for this. And so the first one is from somebody with a large DSO. And he says, we've been talking for quite some time about the inflection point that's coming in the DSO space, the moment when capital comes off the sidelines and back into the dental market. My question is 2 parts. 1, when do you now foresee that inflection point happening, if at all? And 2, how do you feel AI is affecting or will affect the timing and or magnitude of this?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be this year. I mean, in limited situations, money is going to come off the sidelines and buy some things. I just told you I may announce some deals here the next time we're together. But in terms of we've hit that inflection point. And by the way, that inflection point for me, there's 2 parts to it. It's not just money on the sidelines. It's the sellers coming to the realization that we have to adjust our expectations as to valuation. It's not just where the buyers said, okay, that's it, we're buying it all. No. The sellers have to say, we're just going to have to lower our prices to something where it's priced to sell. And at that point, the buyers are like, at that price, now we're all going to get in. Those 2 things haven't happened yet. The sellers have not. The sellers are getting closer. I can tell you, having spent a lot of time with a lot of candidates to sell, they're getting closer to maybe, starting to be more aggressive on their valuation, but I don't think they're there yet. And I think the buyers are still a little bit cautious, with everything going on. I mean, it doesn't help that these wars continue to break out and other things. And again, this not being a political show, but just mentioning all the global unrest and these wars don't help things. And when you got to spend money on the budget, so why it's important to talk about not right or wrong about these wars, but they cost money and they're very expensive. And when president goes to Congress and says, hey, I need all this extra money to drop these bombs and all these things, even if you approve it, then you're spending a lot of money on that. And the concern is that, we may be in some type of recession or something may happen. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And obviously, when we were last together, I don't think we had gone to war, in the Middle East yet. So that's a new development. So I don't know.
No, that could have happened overnight. Yeah.
Literally, they keep happening overnight over there with these things that keep going on. So it's not doing anything to eliminate the uncertainty or reduce the uncertainty. So the question about the inflection point, we're certainly not there yet. The sellers aren't there yet. The buyers are still cautious. I do think we'll see some deals. I'm going to announce some. There's going to be some you're going to see, but that's very different from everybody jumped into the swimming pool and we're rocking and rolling. I don't think that's maybe end of this year, but I'm more increasingly thinking it's going to be sometime in 27 for, sort of that moment.
Okay. So one thing, when you talk about it, hope to be announcing a few deals. Can you give me an idea of a number? I mean, are we talking like 2? Are we thinking 7? Are we thinking 20?
No, not 20. I'm aware I'm involved in about 3 or 4 of them right
Okay.
now that are good. I'm aware of a couple more, so maybe by the end of the second quarter, we could have 5, 6 announcements, that are
Okay.
good. We're starting to get back into it, but this is not 2021. I mean, it's not even close to 2021, but we're getting back there a little bit.
And that is actually another question that comes in, and it probably will make you laugh. What is the likelihood of the EBITDA multiples going up to the 2022 record levels anytime in the next 24 months?
Well, I'm fairly confident the answer to that is 0 in the next 24 months. Now, if you want to hang around 10, 15, 20 years, sure. I mean, absolutely. We've got boom and bust cycles. All kinds of things can happen. But the way that question is worded, like in the next 24 months, like, no. I don't try to promise anything, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be 0, that in the next 2 years, we're not going to see a return to because I mean, honestly, even if interest rates started coming down to crazy amounts, it would take a couple years to generate that kind of demand again. So no, I don't see that in the next 2 years. I do think what you could get to, in the next 2 years is, a steady amount of deal flow at rational prices.
Okay, what is a rational price? Like, what are we thinking about multiples now compared to the heyday?
It's so difficult, Beth. I used to like to do this show. Now it's like this is like real work. I come here now, and it was just like
just you and me, Brian. No one's listening.
No one's
just you
listening.
And me having a conversation.
I used to like coming here. Now I just, it's not as fun. But
are you sweating? Are you getting hot under the collar?
I mean, I don't know. Look, this is what best I can say. During 21, you had 14, 15, 16 time. I thought they were crazy at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually was not like in favor of them. I was closing deals, but I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe we're doing this. There were crazy things. A rational multiple, there's no guarantee somebody's going to pay this, but what we used to say before the market really accelerated, like we were doing a decent amount of deals in 2018, 2019 that I thought were really robust, but at rational numbers before records started setting. It could be a 10 or 11 multiple, a 12 multiple, something like that. All of a sudden it was around when they thought that the capital gains taxes were going to go up in 21 and everybody roared back at the end of COVID and 20. We were seeing deals that were trading at 11 and 12, at 14, at 16. I mean, crazy things to me, were sort of going on. I feel like, some right sizing that you're going to see for a lot of deals are going to be low. Let's just call it low double digits. I mean, the market will tell me that no one's going to, just because I said it, it will be what it will be. But I think it'll be low double digits is what you're going to see. And it'll be a long time, before you see some crazy multiples. Now, that's not to say if you're best in class, if your organization is the undisputed best in class, it's conceivable like on a one-time basis, people could get into a bidding war and one particular asset could go for a crazy price. But in terms of a routine basis, no, I don't see that.
No, last time we were chatting in January, we were also talking about some like IPOs, right? And we had one DSO that just had announced that it was going IPO. There's been some speculation that has reached my ears. I'm sure has reached your ears. What do you have to say to
I talked to some of those CEOs over the last 2 weeks. We're not going to name names, but some of the things that you think, and it's a rumor, I talked to some of those CEOs recently, they're not going to tell me stuff, but just to kind of ask them about it. What are you comfortable sharing? And I'll just say this, unless they're doing the greatest poker game ever, like I've known some of these people for years, unless they're just master of poker and everything, I don't see that happening in the near future. I don't. I've heard some of the same rumors you've had about, are we going to announce a big IPO? I mean, the main reason is the conditions don't support it right now. I mean, I would be surprised if we saw one because, again, the interest rates aren't low enough. The market hasn't sort of rebounded to where it needs to be to support one of those. So I would be surprised if we saw some big announcement in the next few months. And having spoken to some of the CEOs at some of the companies that are, very commonly mentioned on some of those, they didn't seem like, again, maybe they had the greatest poker face ever, to me, but it didn't seem like that is imminently on the horizon. It just didn't seem that way to me, but, we'll have to see.
I have to
I
ask the
think it'll
question.
happen eventually, though. I do think some of the bigger organizations, I think the right path at some point for some of them, because they've gotten so big, is probably to go public. That's just my opinion. I think that might make sense. I just don't see, like today, like right now in this environment, I don't see it
So
being.
you're not anticipating that there's going to be some major announcement on like a stage in Denver in July or anything like that?
I'm not aware of one
Okay.
that I'm planning right now. We do have a segment that we're going to talk about in Denver about going public,
Okay.
and I know one organization that has been talking about, trying to aggregate it to go public. I feel like they told me they're almost certain they're going to come on stage and talk about it. So I'm looking forward to it, but I don't think there's going to be some blockbuster announcement like you're talking about. But we are planning on addressing that at our conference, because I do think in the years that follow, it's going to be a viable path. And you're going to, so far, I think we had the Park Dental one. That was a $20 million one that they
Mhm.
announced. That was a modest size one that worked for that organization. And at some point, I'd like to talk to those guys about good, bad, what are their views on, sort of doing it. But I do think at some point, 27, 28, you probably are going to see the big announcement you're talking about. You probably are going to see that, at some point. I'm just not aware of it right now, but we'll see if they announce it next week. I guess maybe we'll do a special episode of this whole thing. I don't know.
Absolutely. That's what we love to do is fake news on the All
Yeah.
Things DSO. I kind of had skipped over the second part of that question that I've been asked. How do you feel like AI is affecting or will affect, the inflection point that this person's talking about?
I don't think so. I mean, not on the M&A markets. AI is revolutionizing dentistry. We all know that. I'm a big fan of diagnostic AI and other forms of AI that make sense. Some of it's shiny objects, but the ones that actually add value, meaning, they're going to bring in new patients, do more with existing patients, cut, expenses, seems like that. I'm a big fan of those sort of AI solutions. But in terms of the M&A markets, I don't know that, in a peripheral way, if you've properly integrated your technology stack into your organization and AI is a part of that, that might make your organization more attractive. But in terms of like AI somehow accelerating the M&A markets, I don't. I think it's two different things. I don't think they're gonna AI by itself is gonna accelerate any M&A markets.
And that you just touched on this, but I wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to expand. One of the other questions that came in are what are some of the top elements that make a DSO most marketable for recap?
Yeah, well, you got to right size your overhead. I mean, too many organizations, when money was cheap, I think made some missteps or footfalls on overhead, and a lot of them have been working diligently to fix it over the last couple of years. But you got to right size your overhead. You got to have the right payer mix if you can. I mean, again, not knocking anybody that takes Medicaid, but the more Medicaid in this environment, it's becoming less attractive because of all the things going on in California and other places to cut reimbursement rates, plus the regulatory risk. So, the less Medicaid generally, the more attractive. Proper overhead, have you integrated specialty, and your tech stack. Like we're talking, are you using dusty boxes in your basement, or do you got a state of the art PMS system? Like, I don't know, Beth, like Denticon, maybe is that one
That's a
we
good
can
one
talk
to
about here?
mention.
I don't know, is that one to talk about? But like, do you have a state of the art PMS system? Are you utilizing diagnostic AI? You got patient finance, you got membership plans, discount plans in there. You're integrating. You're not sending all your ortho or endo or implant cases out for a box of cookies at Christmas time. You're actually, keeping them in-house in some way. Do you got a clear aligner program? I mean, all of these sort of things can dramatically affect, your valuation, plus your culture. And we've been talking about this too. You could be making a lot of money, but if it's just a toxic culture and you're losing people and nobody wants to work there, that's really going to hurt you. Even if on paper you look great, if it turns out that it's a bad culture, that's going to hurt you as well. So you got to have a good culture on top of all that stuff.
Absolutely. And, that culture piece is really important. And it kind of leads into one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, which is turnover. I read group dentistry now. Obviously, I follow a lot of the trends. I do feel like we are seeing a lot of folks exiting right now from C-suite and from vice president of operations and those kinds of roles.
Both voluntarily and involuntarily, they're
Correct.
exiting right now.
You can name names as to who's who.
This is tough stuff, right? There is no shame if you're an executive and, unfortunately, you were shown the door. There is no shame in that in this market. These are once in a generation difficult conditions. And some people, because I know a lot of people that have been affected personally and spent time analyzing on, both ends of it. And I can tell you some people, it was just bad time. It was just, look, they had to take the fall for stuff, but they were put in an almost impossible situation. And, unfortunately, I think a change of scenery will do everybody, in some of those situations, a change of scenery will do everybody a lot of good. And there's no shame in it. There are some situations, of course, where people were in over their head, maybe, didn't do a good job. Other situations where they did the best they could, but it was a near impossible, situation. And, others where they left voluntarily, where they just said, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. I thought this was going to be smooth sailing, like some of these that I know. I took this job like in 22 when the market was booming and I thought this was going to be easy. And this is crazy now. I don't want to do that. All the expenses are up and the reimbursements are flat and, this and all the dentists are leaving. Like, this is crazy. I don't want to do this anymore, and they're going to other verticals, taking jobs in other healthcare companies. So, there's all kinds of stuff going on, but this has been the most challenging conditions we've seen, I'm in year 31 since I've been involved in this industry. So yeah, there has been a lot of turnover for a lot of different reasons.
I feel like I'm introducing somebody to John Fiddler at Fiddler and Associates like every week right now. It's just
John is busy. He's in very, he's not just him. He's got a whole staff working there, and they're very, very busy. And John, I think does a great job of trying to manage this situation right now.
Yeah, it really is true. What you mentioned, like insurance reimbursements, and I know that we talk about this quite a bit, but one of the questions that came in was from a dental group. I think they have 9 locations. And they said, what are we going to do about insurance company low reimbursements, clawbacks, overlapping fee schedules with lease networks, downgrading, et cetera? And I got to tell you, I'm not an RCM person, so I don't actually even know quite what all of those things mean.
Yeah, we really need, I know what they mean. We really need insurance reform, right now. What it means, what they're saying, and it's true, is there's a record rate of clawbacks, meaning they come back and they say, you improperly billed this, give us our money back. We reimbursed you. We want our money back. And a lot of it's unjust. Okay. I've been handling a lot of these audits. I handled one very recently that was completely made up stuff. We got them to reverse it. We wrote a really nasty letter, it was really powerful, like point by point, like you said this, and that's like completely untrue. Check out this document. Then you said this and check this out. And it was ridiculous. It was like the stuff they were saying is like, you're billing stuff without x-rays to support it. And then we go through and the x-rays are there. Right. Like, you said there weren't x-rays. They're all here. See exhibits A, B, and C. And then you said that we failed to do this, but we did. It's right there. And it was like they gave like 25 reasons for why they were like, trying to recoup all this money. And we, on all 25, showed them that they were wrong. And then we get like an unapologetic, like 1 paragraph letter, like, after they paid me, whatever, tens of thousands of dollars to go do this. And then we get something that says, oopsie, like literally, they should have just said oopsie, but it's like, we have reviewed your appeal of the following and it's granted where, sorry for any inconvenience. Have a nice day. And if we didn't do that, this particular client would have lost $1 million, but because they had the resources to say, fine, we'll pay you, whatever it was, tens of thousands of dollars to go through all this and file this, we ended up not actually paying back a penny. But that's the environment that we're in right now, where I'm seeing crazy things. I'm seeing, they're kicking people off premier programs. They're asking to recoup millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And looking at these things, it used to be that this would happen in egregious situations, like somebody clearly committed fraud, somebody made it up. Not in situations like this where everything was medically necessary, everything's properly documented in the medical records, and they're still doing it. And I think it's a product of the times. When times get tough, everybody tries to claw at every penny, and these insurance companies, unfortunately, are no different. How do you fix it? Well, the problem that just gives me like a lack of hope, I just want to put my head down, is you pass some type of insurance reform. You go and you pass laws that say you can't do this type of stuff. But our Congress was really struggling to agree on things right now. Everybody knows that. We're having a hard time getting anybody to agree on anything. So I don't hold out a lot of hope that, suddenly we're going to pass laws and reform and things like that. I think if enough of the industry were to get together and either file lawsuits or legal actions or do things, that could certainly impact it. And maybe we're getting to the point. I have been approached dozens of times over the last couple of years by various clients that say, hey, let's all band together as a group and let's file this lawsuit. And I've always thought it was a good idea. It was well justified. But then they're like, maybe we shouldn't rock the boat, or, it's going to cost X amount to go to court and do all this. Oh, maybe we shouldn't. And, it ends up not happening, which I can understand because litigation is very extraordinarily expensive. I can understand why people say, maybe we're not, upon reflection, we're not going to do it. But unless that either happens, that there's, some type of massive, litigation, or we pass some laws that say, they can't do this, or enough of the industry gets together and says, we're not going to participate in your insurance plan. You're not treating us well. So now you can go back to your 100,000 members and tell them nobody will take this insurance because you don't treat us well. I mean, if people did something like that, maybe we'd be able to get some reform, but it's been very, very hard.
Speaking of people doing things, does it have to be at the dental group level, or can patients, is there any kind of like patients bill of rights, of patients being able to band together to come after and say like, hey, we feel like the insurance companies are denying medically necessary coverage, and would that have more of an impact? Or at least,
if enough patients did band together, or even the employers, and the employers went to the carriers, employers more than the patients, because the patients are part of the employers. But if the employers went to the carriers and said, like it would have to be major companies, big major company that employs 20,000 people and says, hey, you're not covering us or treating our members well, we're going to switch to another plan. That would have impact. And if enough of those companies got together and, went to the carriers and said, if you don't treat our folks well, we're going to do something else, it might have an impact. But then what you can end up seeing is they'll just treat those companies' employees well, but not necessarily everybody else. So there's so many challenges here to getting this solved. The easiest way, and it's very hard, would be to get a law passed somehow, either state law or federal law, that just says you can't kind of do some of the things that are occurring. But it's just so hard to get Congress and even state legislatures to agree to things now.
Really interesting. Really, really interesting. All right. We had a question that came in that says, can DSOs get to true unit level, parentheses, office level, profitability at the current interest rates?
Well, if you're talking about clinical level, yeah, they can. But if you're talking about like what we were talking about earlier, a DSO that's leveraged and their interest rates tripled, no, that's been what's been going on throughout the last 3 years, up at the corporate level, where all of a sudden, the company's heavily leveraged and the interest rates tripled and they just can't service the debt. So a couple things happens. Either the lender now becomes the owner. We've seen that. A couple extreme cases, they've sort of had receivers come in and just, take over, the company, either an informal receivership or something like that. A couple extreme examples, they shut it all down, so I don't think, no, if the question meant your interest rates tripled at the corporate level and can you return to profitability, not easily. No, that's almost going to be impossible without restructuring your debt, in some way. But down at the clinical level, Beth, and that's a tragedy in all of this. Some of the organizations that failed because of the overhead up at the corporate level, the practices were having some of their best years yet. I mean, the practices were doing terrific. And, to sort of have that dichotomy where the practices may be having a record year, but you're still in default on your credit facility or, going into receivership because you can't service your debt, that was the tragedy in some of these situations.
Yeah, and a tragedy is a good word for it. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, when DSOs are in financial distress, what do they actually go through from forbearance to foreclosure? Talk us through kind of when they're in financial distress, what actually happens? What goes?
Yeah, if you've got a car lot, Beth, okay, and you're in default on your credit facility.
That is, in fact, what I'm planning on going into next.
Well, it may be, wait, I don't know, it could be easy. I don't know. But you got a car lot. You got, 100, 10,000 cars on the thing, and you're in default. I might foreclose on it. I might walk in, just say, I'm now going to take over your business. I'm going to sell off these cars. I may just take over the business and just sell the cars in the ordinary course of business, or I may liquidate it and just sell them off on a one-time basis. But I'll come and get a, foreclosure order and kind of do this, or you could voluntarily surrender the keys or something like that. In the DSO industry, they don't like to do that because now you're the owner of dental offices. I mean, you're not the direct owner because you can't, because you're a bank, but you've got to be a DSO and you can't really own it. You got to manage them, and it becomes dicey and complicated. So you don't see a lot of actual foreclosures where they just walk in and judicially foreclose. What you see is a lot.
You can't leave patients without care either.
You see it's dicey, right? So you see a lot of situations. Sometimes in the loan documents it'll say things like, "Well, the lender gets to appoint a new licensed dentist to own the thing, and then we'll put that person in, then we'll take over the DSO." So, there's a way to kind of do it, but it's messy. It's not easy. It's not like, hey, we took the car lot and we're selling the cars. Like that's easy. Or we took over the factory and we're selling off all the refrigerators or whatever it is. Like it's not like that. It's difficult. You can't just say we took over the dental practices and we're selling the sucky hoses. Yeah, they depreciate you're not going to get anything. You have to figure out the only path to getting paid is you got to operate the business or figure out how to operate the business. So what you see sometimes is the sophisticated lenders are sometimes private equity groups, and they know how to own businesses. So they'll just say, you know what, instead of having debt, we're now the owner of the business. We're converting the debt to equity, and we'll take over this, and we're the new private equity owner of this business. And a lot of these PE firms have operated DSOs before. So they're not, maybe they would have preferred just to get paid on their loan, but, a little audible got called and they're like, all right, well, we'll handle this. That's fine. And usually what happens in that situation is the existing private equity group often gets wiped out of their interest. And then the new owner comes in, they got to cut deals with the dentists and cut deals as to what their ownership share. A lot of the dentists had rollover, and you need those dentists to operate the business going forward. So you got to cut some deals, with them to come in and do it. So you see that a lot. That's sort of like sometimes they'll say they handed the keys over to the lender. It's just kind of like, instead of an actual legal foreclosure, it's just a voluntary sort of thing with a lot of lawyers involved, papering it all up. But it's just kind of like a voluntary situation like that. Other times you'll see forbearance where the bank will say, traditional banks will do this, where they say, the interest rate is 10%, you're in default, but tell you what, we'll forbear on foreclosing as long as, you do A, B, C, D, and E, or you get this thing back in order, or you work on doing this, or you don't do any more mergers and acquisitions for the next year. We'll sort of not permanently waive this, but temporarily turn the other cheek on this one, or sort of let this go. And that's a forbearance situation to basically, if you fulfill certain conditions, maybe pay a fee, they will not declare you in default, and they'll give you time to kind of clean up. You see that. You very seldom see an actual foreclosure where you go to court and get an order that you can take it over. You also very seldom see a bankruptcy, an actual bankruptcy where they take the extraordinary step of filing bankruptcy, because it's complicated, because you have clinics, that are owned by dentists that treat patients, and you've got a DSO and a management relationship. You got all these different entities, and the implications of a bankruptcy there are messy, not impossible, but messy. And I think people want to avoid messiness and try to reach as constructive a solution as you can, to come out of some type of default.
When do the provider contracts need to be redone? Is it every time that's a new lender comes in, or like how?
It's changing a little bit. It used to be that if you just bought the DSO, but you left the ownership in place down at the practice level and everything stood the same down there, you didn't have to tell anybody. A lot of the payers are getting a little more sophisticated with DSOs and understanding it a little better. And they're now saying, if you change from doctor owned to DSO owned, we want to know about it. If you get a new owner at the DSO level, we want to know about it. But it's very much payer by payer. Some don't care. Some say, look, if Dr. Jones owns the practice, and even though they got a new owner up here or a foreclosure or whatever happens up here, Dr. Jones still owns this and his employees, clinical employees are down here. We don't care. You don't got to tell us nothing. Just keep operating. Others are getting more, sophisticated about it and saying, we understand DSOs and we want to know if there's if there is a DSO. Two, if that DSO's owners change hands, we want to know about it. And then in that case, sometimes you just make a disclosure or a notice form. Other times they may require re-credentialing, but probably not a full-blown re-credentialing. Usually you just got to give them notice. Other times, no notice at all.
And that's for credentialing. I was thinking also just in terms of like employment contract for the clinicians, for the providers. If the DSOs change ownership, or
often you want to tie these people back up again, right? You don't want to come down there. Like when I'm on the buy side, sometimes if it's a dentist owned organization, there won't even be employment contracts, and we're like, that's not good. We want like actual I mean you can do that, but then we have no assurance after we buy the thing they're going to stay. So we're like, no, you got to sign employment agreements as a condition of doing the deal. If you we can't make the dentist do it, but if they don't do it, we're not going to do the deal, or enough of them don't do it, we're not going to do the deal. That's one way. Another way is they already have contracts, but we either want those contracts assigned or we want to do new contracts. We might say, you got a lot of these contracts, some of them expire in a year or two. We don't want to mess with that. We want everybody to sign a fresh 5-year contract. And sometimes you got to put incentives together to make that happen. But, that generally, if you're on the buy side, is a requirement. What you don't want to do is buy an organization and have contracts either expire and you got to start a renegotiation right after you finished, or have people that don't have any contracts and they can leave anytime they want. You think you bought this valuable asset, and then next thing you know, everybody's leaving and you're losing all that productivity. I mean, you don't want to be in that situation. So you need to take steps to make sure, whenever I'm on the buy side, that you're not in that situation.
So Brian, going to dad mode for everybody listening for a moment. What's your, a lot of contracts are coming up, right? It's been 5 years since maybe since a DSO was acquired or something like that during the heydays, 2021, 2022. So as dad to the industry, what would you like to say to everybody who's listening?
Well, most of them are going to, mostly are going to have to re-up those contracts because a lot of them have rollover shares. Mm-hmm. And if you leave your contract or go, your shares get discounted, or you get, there are penalties involved. So, I mean, I think in most instances, like unless you just turned 75, look, okay, I'm not going to fault you if that's it. You want to retire. But if you're like a 51-year-old dentist and, your thing is, coming up, it's really in your best interest to renew it. I can't imagine a situation, unless again, you have some health or some other issue that, requires you to step down. There shouldn't be, it's in your best interest to, renew that contract. Just generally in most situations, it's going to be in your interest to renew that agreement, so that when the markets do finally come back around, you'll be able to take advantage of, the maximum value of your rollover shares. There's usually some type of penalty or some type of issue, involved if you're no longer a part of the organization. So I'm not quite panicked. You make a good point. Some of those things are starting to run, but it's just not in the best interest of most dentists to be like, you're right, I'm leaving. That wouldn't benefit them in that situation.
I feel like you and I have talked about margin compression for like 2.5 years now that we've been doing this.
Too long. I'm getting tired of it. It's just too much.
I have not been talking to my usual, CEOs lately, or CFOs. How are current global dynamics impacting the cost of goods right now? Like, are you hearing that it's getting even worse?
Other than oil at the moment, okay. A lot of those tariffs have sort of, sort of come down, or a court struck some down recently. So, a lot of the thing at the beginning of the year, I mean, this is why it's so tough, right? Your first questions to me were, how come we haven't all jumped back in the water yet? Well, this is tough. Like, it just keeps happening this way. Right? We started the year off, right, in January with tariffs across the whole developed world. We weren't even really at war with anybody yet. It was just all these tariffs and all these things. And that was
last year. That was last year. Yeah.
Well, last year too, but this year, again, in 26, we still had these tariffs and things going on. So that was like an initial problem. And then you tacked on these wars on top of it. It was like whack-a-mole. So I guess, right, in 25 is when all the tariffs really started with the new presidential administration. But a lot of those issues were lingering throughout 25. But at the beginning of this year, Beth, the Supreme Court struck down some of that stuff. So you were thinking, okay, so we don't got to worry about these tariffs that much anymore. So now maybe, prices are going to come down a little bit. This is going to be okay. And then we went to war. So now that's what I'm saying. These things keep coming up. So now,
I have strong feelings. I'm not saying it, but I have strong feelings on all of this.
We don't do right or wrong on this show. We're just stating the facts and how it affects the DSO market. So now we had this war. So the price of oil is skyrocketing. I mean, there's no question about that. It's been going down a little bit, when we got ceasefires, and we think we might not, might have.
I paid $4.65 today. And I mean, it wasn't even like high grade.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I think the war started like it's been a month. End of February, early March. So the oil skyrocketed most of March, and then when various ceasefires and things occurred, it kind of started to go down. But then there's blockades, and it was going back up. So it's still elevated. So I think right now we're seeing inflation kind of going up due primarily to oil prices. I think if we can alleviate this conflict, in the Middle East, I think the oil, without question, will go down. And then, that's the primary driver of inflation right now, not other things. So I think if we can get the conflict resolved, the oil kind of goes back down, I don't expect to see sort of a long-term impact. But if we did, like just hypothetically, if they couldn't resolve this thing and there's blockades and everybody's bombing everybody and all this stuff goes on, oil prices will remain highly elevated. When the oil prices remain elevated, everything goes up. The cost of patients to drive to the office, the cost to manufacture goods where, you use oil when you're manufacturing it and equipment, everything's going to go up, and, it's going to be tricky. I think the conflict's been too short for that to really be permanent yet. But if that thing was to linger on for several more months, I think we would feel it. I think by summertime, if this thing was not resolved, we would start to, feel this. Your plane tickets would go up, everything would kind of, go up, but not with a 1 month or so conflict. I think if we can, and I don't know if we can or we can't, but if we can get this thing resolved next few weeks, I don't think it'll be a lasting effect.
Well, I forget which publication I read this in, but it was saying that Europe is predicting that they're going to run out of jet fuel in 5 weeks.
I read the same thing you did. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to happen now, but like by summertime, if this thing still lingers on, if they opened up the strait, no one would run out of fuel. It'll just be expensive. Like the boats will get there, but the price is just going to be crazy. If there's truly a blockade and nobody can get anywhere, that's when scary things like Europe running out of jet fuel might happen. I'm predicting it'll just be more expensive if they can't get this resolved.
You're on a plane like literally once or twice a week, right?
I am.
So, I mean,
mostly in the U.S. though, and I don't think we don't get our oil mostly from the Strait of Hormuz. So I don't think our prices will be higher. I think the plane tickets.
You've noticed it, right?
I've already noticed. We're not going to run out of like jet fuel, and like Chicago airport's not running out of jet fuel or anything anytime soon.
No, but like I was just buying my ticket for ADSO in Chicago. I was just buying my ticket, to come to Denver, and I mean, kicking myself that I didn't do it, 2 months ago because the prices have skyrocketed.
Yeah, but Dykema is a bargain at any price. I mean, I don't want to see anybody
flying in. I'm not flying. Yes, it is absolutely worth any price to be there, Brian. There is no question of that. And for everyone listening, let me just make it absolutely clear: fly in on Tuesday and stay through at least Friday night.
Right, that's right.
Because it has now expanded into much more than just the usual Thursday, Friday that it was 10 years ago. But my point is that whether you are, a regional manager, a regional vice president, right, where you might have been hopping on a plane to go and visit, different areas that you oversee, planning what conferences to go to. Like, I know a lot of companies, and on the exhibitor side, even more than people I've talked to on the DSO side, that are really having to make decisions about where they're going to be exhibiting, where they're going to be going this year, how many people they're going to be sending, because it's become more expensive for the travel.
I mean, it's a tough situation, right? Because one, you might say we can't afford to attend as many events as an organization, and then you're going to maybe miss opportunities at some of them. Then the ones that you go to, you may miss opportunities because not as many people attend the events because they're worried about it. So, yeah, I mean, it's an all. I hope they resolve this. I mean, the fuel prices and the air ticket prices don't help anybody. I mean, they make it harder for us to network in person. Nobody likes this. We're going to do this virtual thing like COVID. Like, we're going to put our masks on and we're going to get on this virtual thing. I mean, that was so 2020, 20. Nobody wants to do that anymore. Maybe you do. I don't want to put a mask on and pretend like we're all on our thing. Nobody wants to do that. People want to see each other in person. They do. And that stuff interferes with it. It really does.
Well, Brian, we're coming up on a full hour. Any last words that you want to share before we hop off?
Well, I mean, there's never a dull moment here. I think the next time we get together, I think there will be some positive announcements on the M&A front. I think there'll be some more really good announcements about our big event, in July. And I think things are getting better. It just gradually, it's not happening all at once. I mean, we are, without question, we're in a much better position right now than we were in 2023. We had this show all through 23. We're much better than we were in 23. We're much better than we were in 24. And we're a little better than we were in 25. So things are, sort of improving and looking up. Just it's slow.
Brian, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you. I so appreciate that you never, ever, ever put any limits on what I can ask. And I love the fact that you take all of the hard balls I throw.
I'm not coming back anymore. This was it, though. I mean, that was it. Like, this one, look, I did my duty, everybody. I made it through this one. I don't think I'm coming back.
Last time I was asking you about ICE and immigration. So I feel like this is much gentler.
Yeah, maybe.
I can't wait to see you again. So I will talk to you very soon. Thanks so much for joining us. For everyone who's looking for information on the Dykema DSO Industry Conference, you can go on to DykemaDSO.com to find the agenda and register. And for everyone that's looking for other resources to help you as you're growing your DSO, please visit planetdds.com. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks. Yep.